Hello, friends. This is WNBA with Shay. I hope everyone's having a great day. I am going to be talking today about the Washington Mystics with Howard Megdal, who you probably all know. And if you don't, now you do. He's great. You know, he created High Post Hoops, which is now TheNext. Which, you know what, I don't feel like I should introduce that. I will let Howard do that. So how about you say hi and introduce yourself and things? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. And Shay, thank you so much for having me on
Sure.
the program. The next is the next evolution in the newsroom we've been building, 24/7, 365 coverage of women's basketball. If you want to make sure you're on top of everything, WNBA, college, high school recruiting, international, the works, our amazing, talented, young, diverse staff is there to bring it to you. And you go to thenext.substack.com. If you could subscribe, it's $9 a month, $72 a year, and it gives all these writers, all these editors, all these podcasters an opportunity to earn a living as much as they can covering the great game of women's basketball. So thenext.substack.com, at TheNextHoops on Twitter, find us on Facebook, and you'll see the coverage. I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah. Anything else that you're working on?
Well, the 9 newsletter, which is, of course, across 5 different women's sports, coverage every single weekday. The next is under the auspices, under the umbrella of the 9. But I'm really proud of the work we're doing there, covering across women's soccer, women's golf, women's tennis, women's basketball, women's hockey, every single weekday. Some great, important voices you can hear there as well. And so those are primary in my mind as of right now when you think about the ways in which we're building an infrastructure of everyday coverage and coverage across sports. I think that's something on the men's sports side that takes for granted. It's not something that we can take for granted yet. And the way we need to build is by making sure that we are lifting all the work that's being done. So making sure when you're putting up a podcast that all of us are making sure that we get the word out. This is how the entire landscape builds.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I definitely looked at that the email that you send right at the beginning when you sign up, and I when you were like, oh, we're gonna be promoting all these people covering for us, and I was like, oh, that's so exciting. It got me worked up a little bit. So, yeah. Anything else you want to promote, or you want to dive into it?
Let's dive into it. Let's start basketball. I miss it.
Yeah, great. So let's do it. So I'm going to do a little bit of an overview just to get everyone up to speed. And if I miss any like major overview things, please let me know. And then we'll really get into talking and hopefully have a little bit of a debate today.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to go back a little bit to 2019. Obviously, the Mystics had one of the best, one of the best offenses that we've ever seen, and they had an offensive rating of 115, and it's absurd. The second place team was the Chicago Sky with an offensive rating of 103.
Mm-hmm.
I did the math and checked that 115 was 2 standard deviations above the mean, so they were very, very good. So yeah, they had an incredible season. Went 28-6 in the regular season. They ran everyone off the court basically every time. They had the double bye in the playoffs. So in the semifinals, they beat the Aces in 4 and the Connecticut Sun in 5 in the finals, which were great series. I mean, I loved it. I know you were there covering it. How was that actually?
It was remarkable. You know, that building that they've built for the Mystics is intimate. It's a little smaller than I'd like for the long term in terms of growth and development of the franchise down the line. That happened for reasons we can get into. But the net result of the experience is it's right on top of the action. It's packed. It's loud. And it absolutely felt like a championship experience. You know, I've covered a lot of championships in a lot of different sports through the years, but it was, in terms of atmosphere, absolutely rivaled any of them that I've been to. And that's important not just for the people who are there as well. It matters on TV. It matters as people are consuming the product. And so I think it was a really big deal for all of them. But I know for the players themselves, they talked about, the adrenaline, the enthusiasm that came from being able to experience it that way. And absolutely it was, I mean, look, I remember coming back to my hotel after game 5 and just feeling like the league had reached a new level.
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about the Mystics, but the Connecticut Sun most years would have won a WNBA championship. And they were as talented as virtually any team we've seen in the history of the league, with the exception, presumably, of the team that beat them. And so it was a big moment for women's basketball, one that eventually they'll get to build on, just not quite as soon as we all expected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm jealous for that you got to be at those games. I mean, it was I definitely remember exactly where I was, and it was insane to watch those. I mean, we were talking yesterday about it, but like Emma Meesseman is one of my favorite players. She's amazing, and in that series, I hated her so much because it was just like I wanted the Connecticut Sun to win, and it was just like she wouldn't miss, and I was like, you need to stop, my friend. So I was so into it for sure.
Can we talk about Emma, because she's such an interesting player to me?
Let's.
So
Yeah.
I remember covering her first year in the league, and she was just this shy, reserved, understated kid of 19 when she got here. And it took her, and it took Mike Thibault in her ear constantly, convincing her she can be this good and she will be this good. And he fundamentally pushed her. At the time, it was Emma Meesseman and Steph Dolson, both to learn the three and expand their game outward. And Mike Thibault teases me about it when we see each other about, oh, you can ask me about positionless basketball, but it's what he did. He fundamentally altered the direction of this league, and a big part of it was how he was able to push Emma Meesseman to grow, develop, and turn into what she is, which is, I mean, she's a backup only in the sense that she was brought off the bench. She is fundamentally a top 10, if not at the very least top 15 player in this league. And we saw it over the course of the finals as well. So to see her get that star turn, it was gratifying for me as somebody who's watched her career develop and covered her for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, she's unstoppable. She can shoot at all three positions and all three levels. And I mean, really, the only knock you can have on her is like she's not the most athletic. But I think that she really overcomes that because she's so smart off the ball. Like she gets into spaces. She's had to like overcome that with being able to see the floor better, and she's a threat off the ball too. So
her length, I think, helps with that as well. I think. A, her length, and B, the system she's in, Washington creates space for you in a way that maybe she would have taken longer to develop somewhere else. But being able to do that in DC, I mean, we're getting into Tina Charles, but it's going to be night and day for Tina in the same way it was for Emma Meesseman, because you just can't focus on her in that same way. I mean, listen, I think it's led to the evolution of so many of their players. Natasha Cloud is another example of somebody who her efficiency from the floor has improved, and she take nothing away from her. She's put the work in. She's done the work to make that happen. But Kristi Tolliver last year had the most efficient year of her career by far. And it wasn't because Kristi Tolliver just suddenly learned how to shoot. She's known how to shoot since she was in Maryland. But she had more open shots last year than ever before as part of this just ridiculous machine of an offense.
Yeah, it was a machine. That is a really good way of describing it. So, what kind of offense how would you characterize their offense last year? What plays did they go to? I mean, obviously they were a 3-point shooting machine. But just like dig deeper, could you dig deeper a little bit into that and explain a little more of what kind of style they were doing? Let's talk offensively.
Offensively, and this is not an area, X's and O's, where I am as skilled as some other people who are in this space, but just their motion offense allows them to have everyone on the floor be able to not just find one another. And if you look at the assist percentages, it's reflected in that there were double-digit assist percentages and a bunch of players north of 20%. but you also have players who are able to shoot it from anywhere on the floor, and that just creates an opportunity where you can use a possession at any point in the shot clock, and it's a big deal. And I'm very curious. Tina Charles is someone who took shots from everywhere with New York, and she expanded her three-point shot, but she wasn't making a lot of them. When we talked to Mike Thibault about it after the trade was made, he said, we're getting her back to where she was back in 2012 in Connecticut. Okay, well, so what does that mean? That means she took somewhere north of 80% of her shots inside the paint back in 2012 when she won an MVP. Is that a Thibault offense in 2020? Well, his offense has evolved as well. So seeing the way those two things interact are going to be a fascinating thing, because, again, there was nobody who was at the rim exclusively last year in DC.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. When I was actually doing some of my research for this, I thought that this was going to be a really fast team, like 4 or 5, like in the league. They were 7th in pace this year.
Yeah.
It's just because they had the flow just all the time. Ball is always moving. So as a viewer, I wasn't like really analyzing the game very, very much at that point, but I was watching the ball and I was like, this is fast. They must be a really fast team. And, that wasn't how it was. They actually had.
I will say, if I could jump in.
Yeah.
And I have to go back and look at this, but I'd be willing to bet 7th in the league this past year would have been top 3 if you go a few years prior to that. And I just think it's worth keeping in mind that the viewer experience of the way in which the league is going and how quickly it's going and how much the league does not slow down is something that is almost across the league, and that, I think, leads to the feel you had as much as anything else. You weren't imagining things. That's absolutely what WNBA basketball is.
Right. So it was a beautiful thing to watch. I mean, it really was. And what about their defensive style? If you could talk to that. I know we've emailed once or twice about defense, and it's definitely not where I excel, and I definitely want to keep working on it. But if you could give me some knowledge here, that'd be great.
I remember, and I'll take you back a little, the day they acquired Elena Deladon and Mike Thibault had his press conference. I said to him something about, how they plan to use her on the defensive end of the ball. And he basically answered, she's going to be dominant offensively. We'll figure out defense as we go. And so I subsequently asked him, I remember that year, how good do you have to be defensively in order to win a title? He basically said top half of the league. His theory, and it's been borne out clearly, was that Siri just thinks I talked to her. Right?
It's all good. It's all good.
So his theory, just so we're clear about it, was that they can outscore everyone and defend enough as long as being in the top half in order to win. And that's just what they went out and did.
Yeah.
And, made a finals in 2018, let's not forget, before they won it all in 2019. So, defensively, they create all kinds of length-related problems for people. I mean, this is just a team that can go very big at you. And you take you back to Game 5 of the finals, and the fact that they were able to throw Emma Meeseman at Jonquel Jones, well, that changed the tenor of the third quarter in that game. Let's not forget that in D.C., that the Connecticut Sun led for much of that final game. There's certainly any number of alternative scenarios where, for instance, if Jonquel Jones stays a little more out of foul trouble and has a game closer to where Game 3, which was, if memory serves, 32-18, one of the great performances in the finals anybody's ever had, that we're talking about the defending champion Connecticut Sun right now. And so, again, it manifested in that way. They defended enough in order for their overwhelming offense to win the day.
I totally agree. As I said, best offense in the league, but actually it's in the numbers too. I mean, they had, if you like defensive rating, like they were 6th. They were absolutely right in the middle. And so they were perfect. And I think the only thing that I really saw that was weak, based on the numbers. So I didn't watch their defense very closely last year because I didn't know how. But in synergy, when I was looking there, it seemed like the thing they struggled most with on defense last year was pick and rolls and anything close to the basket. Would you say that was a fair evaluation?
Sure. Well, think about it this way: they didn't have your typical shot blocker staying in the paint. And so you're making trade-offs. You know, the thing that that Mike always talks about is the team's defensive rebound. And that was something that he wanted to see them get better at. Well, now you throw in somebody who can be an elite defender when she's fully invested in Tina Charles, somebody who's one of the best rebounders in the history of the league as well.
Yeah.
And Mike, in one shot, has addressed his pick and roll defense, which you're absolutely right about, and their defensive rebounding efficiency as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so great. But basically, at the end of the day, their offense outweighed their defense by a lot. And I think I want to move on to some of their offseason stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, so basically, they drafted Sugg Sutton and Jalen Agnew, 24th and 36th picks. Unfortunately, they didn't get to go to training camp to fight for that 11th spot. So I mean, that's too bad, but let's go on to free agencies. Unless you really want to talk about either of them, I kind of wanted to focus. We're going to keep.
I will just say very briefly that Sugg Sutton, she was a Karen Aston point guard, so never underestimate her. Karen Aston trains smart point guards, and Aston, I'm eager to see where she lands because she's an elite coach who I think got a bit of a raw deal. But Agnew is a terrific shooter. A lot of teams liked her. She was on a bunch of teams' draft boards. And again, I was just on a Zoom with Christina Needway, which is why we got delayed actually a little bit. And
Tell us about that a little.
So she's the 9th overall pick in the draft last year. Has trouble making, not just a roster, but once she made the roster, she had trouble getting playing time in Connecticut. And so I brought up to her, that question. She just talked about the fact that there's so much more talent in this league than there are spots. And so both of these players you're talking about absolutely could, in the right scenario, find an opportunity. Getting drafted by DC with what they were bringing back, and then you bring back Leslie coming off of an injury, it wasn't going to be there. That's just the sad reality of it.
Yeah, it really is too bad, but it is what it is, as you said. So let's just, I want to go briefly over some free agency stuff just to keep going with the context here. They had that Tolliver trade, so she's at the Sparks. Obviously, big loss there, which we'll get into. Brought in Leilani Mitchell. I love Leilani. Despite the talent difference, but I really like her. And then they had the Tina Charles trade. It's a little bit of a complicated trade because there's 3 teams involved. So I'll just talk about, just to go over it, because I always forget, I'll just talk about Washington's side of it. So Washington obviously got Tina Charles from New York, and then Washington gave New York Shatori Walker-Kimbrough and their first round pick, which was the 12th pick, which ended up being Jasmine Jones. And Washington also gave their first round pick in 2021, so next year, to Dallas. So they lost 2 draft picks here and lost Shatori Walker-Kimbrough.
Right. So not a small loss, by the way. Shatori Walker-Kimbrough struggled to get into the rotation for the reasons, see every conversation about how incredibly hard it is in this league. But, she's a legit shooter. She can defend twos. She's somebody who, again, can play a role in this league. I fundamentally believe in her. But when you have a chance to bring in Tina Charles and see what you got, Tina Charles she struggled last year. Her numbers were not good. I mean, if you dig into the synergy, there are some things there below the top line, and we were just talking about field goal percentage that are real ugly. She was, I believe, not just at the very bottom in terms of points per possession on pick and roll, but by at least several tenths of a point. I mean, it was just, a real struggle for her last year in New York, which had its own set of problems last year, not least of which that they were essentially playing in a shed. But the reality of having her on this team is she's not 35 or 36. She's barely over 30. She absolutely should have a bunch of years ahead of her, and at the very least, she should have a bunch of years that would correspond with the peak of Elena Delda. And so the way Mike has handled this, I 100%, to me, if you have Elena Delva, you've got a generational player. You got a player look, not to go a little bit off subject, but there's a handful of players in the history of my work covering basketball where I came away saying, I've seen something I never saw before. It's happened to me 5 times in my life, is what I'd say. It happened to me the first time I saw Allen Iverson. It happened to me when I was covering a high school tournament in Trenton, New Jersey, and I saw a kid from Ohio named LeBron James. It happened to me when I was covering Davidson men's basketball at the Garden, and they had this guy named Steph Curry who looked like I had heard the stories of Pete Maravich. And then it happened to me when I saw Brianna Stewart for the first time, and it happened to me the first time I saw Elena Delle Donne. These are players who are doing things, not just great players, but players we've never seen before. That's what Elena Delle Donne is. And so when you have her, and you have her in her prime playing for you, you max out. You sell out for now. And that's what the trade for Tina Charles was. It is selling out for now and getting even better so that you can turn around and look and say, we didn't just have one banner, we had 3 or 4 or 5 banners.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Elena Delle Donne is, I would say she's close to the GOAT if she's not. I don't see that many people arguing that, but I can't see why not.
Well, there are a few ways to look at it, right? If you look at what she does on the offensive boards, the defensive boards, she adds to it. If you look at the fact that she elevated her defensive game significantly over the last couple of years, suddenly a lot of the gap that exists between players and what they're on pace to do and what Tamika Catchings did. And to me, that's where the conversation starts. Catchings, if you go by win shares, is not just the highest in history of the WNBA. She's more than 20% higher than the next person, Lauren Jackson. That's how far and above Tamika Catchings is statistically. And then I had the privilege of covering her. So I was able to see the way, if you want to say the eye test, as Doug Feinberg of the AP, we go back and forth about it. But the eye test was the same thing. Tamika Catchings lifted her teammates. I mean, she took Indiana Fever teams that had other talent, but did not have any business being in the finals, winning the finals. And they got there because Tamika Catchings lifted them.
Yeah.
But so for Elena to get there, it requires a second half of a career that looks a lot like what she did in DC last year. And she has an opportunity to reach it. Absolutely should be in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually do the on-off for this, but I know that sometimes the Mystics, there were a couple times this year where they lost by a lot. Mm-hmm. Guess who wasn't on the court?
Right.
Exactly. So.
I mean, just the fact that when she gets downhill, she's unstoppable. But she's a 40+% three-point shooter, so you absolutely have to respect that fully. You can't really stop it because she's 6'5", taking those shots. So either she's too quick for the 5 you throw out at her, or you have a smaller player and she just shoots over top of that player. It's just there's no plan. There's no stopping her. There was a story about Stan Musial. They would ask pitchers how you pitch to Stan Musial, and one of them said, you throw him your best stuff and you go back up third base. And that's basically the same idea when it comes to Elena Delle Donne, is that you can throw your best ideas at her, but she's going to get what she's going to get anyway. She's this unstoppable force of nature.
Yeah, and man, this is not what. Okay, yes, this is what bothers me a lot about people, like this argument that defense is very, very important. Like it obviously is. But when the other team has really high caliber players, they're going to score regardless of how good your defense is. So like, I would just put my eggs more in the offensive basket than the defensive basket, which obviously happened.
I don't know. I think it's more complicated than that. I think, first of all, to be able to build around an Elena Delle Donne, you need an Elena Delle Donne. How many of them there are out there? Very, very few. There's the type of player where you'd say, well, the physical capabilities are such that you cannot stop her. You got EDD. The way Brianna Stewart plays when she played in 2018 was a similar scenario. Diana Taurasi was going to get hers no matter what. If you feed Brittany Griner now, she's going to get hers. You're not going to be able to stop her. So but that list of players who you can't even slow down if you wanted to. I don't mean that there are players who would get theirs no matter what, but you can slow them down, or you can make them shoot 7 for 19 instead of 12 for 19, and that makes a difference at the margins. I just think you have to a certain extent, build around defense, unless you can go add somebody like Elena Deladon, and that's what Mike did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes. So let's go on to the lineup and what it's looking like, and who's coming off the bench and stuff. So I'll go over the starting 5 from 2019. Latoya Sanders at the 5, EDD, Atkins, Tolliver mostly, and then Cloud. So I guess I'll go first with the starting 5, who I think it's basically going to be the same. The only thing that's different is the Tolliver position. And so,
well, I think Tina will start at the 5.
You think so? Okay. Okay.
I think he didn't trade for Tina to bring her off the bench.
Okay.
And I think what you'll see Tina in that role, acting in a more classic early career Tina Charles mode for this Washington team. Not playing 35 minutes and being asked to shoulder so much of the offensive load the way she did in New York. And I frankly, listen, I've had a chance to see Tina Charles up close. She's one of the smartest people in this league. She's one of the toughest people in this league. And you get her an opportunity to go win that championship she has always wanted to win. And I think she can do whatever it takes. And then, you mentioned the Tolliver part. I don't have any reason to think Leilani Mitchell's not going to fill that role and fill it well. And so we should probably talk about what Tolliver was and what she wasn't.
Yes, so that's definitely what I wanted to go with first. I want to talk about Tolliver. So it seems like I'm on board with you that it is Leilani Mitchell who will take that wing spot for Tolliver. So the question then is how big of a hole is Tolliver leaving by going to the Sparks, and how well does Leilani Mitchell fill that hole? So I'll let you go on this one first.
So it used to drive me crazy, and the great Lindsay Gibbs, who you all should know, subscribe to Power Plays if you haven't, is somebody who talks to me about this. When they would call her a point guard, she's not the point guard. Natasha Cloud is the point guard. Natasha Cloud runs the offense. This is not a knock on Kristi Tolliver, who is a great player. There's a reason why Kristi Tolliver teams win championships in DC, in LA, at University of Maryland. Kristi Tolliver is great, but she's not a point guard. What is she? She's a 2 guard who can create her own shot and takes the big shot when you need her to do it, and steps forward and does what is necessary.
Yeah.
So let's take those in turn. Can Leilani Mitchell take the big shot when it's necessary? Sure she can. Can Leilani Mitchell shoot the ball effectively from 3? She sure can. She was a very efficient player at that level and is very good at getting to the rim as well. Mm-hmm. Can she be Kristi Tolliver? That's a hard thing. That's a high bar to reach, but maybe she doesn't. Let's say she's 80% in Kristi Tolliver, and then Tina Charles makes up that production at the 5, and you're getting a little more of it at the rim. They were not in a position where they only had one good shot in any given possession. This is a DC team that can get production different places, and if it's shifting things around, it means 2020 looks a little different. Doesn't necessarily mean it looks less impressive or less effective, even with Kristi Tolliver back in LA.
Yeah, I think she's not as good as Kristi Tolliver. I think the biggest downgrade here is just Leilani doesn't create space as well for herself as Kristi Tolliver does. I think Tolliver does that at an elite level.
Yeah, I mean, who does, right?
Right.
I mean,
it's Tolliver.
Having that ability, having that move to be able to, basically the jab step, among other things, that is a separator for her and how many others in this league? Not that many. Chelsea Gray comes to mind. EDD does it, which is absurd in and of itself. You shouldn't be allowed. If you're 6'5", like that, you shouldn't be allowed to also have that ability to create that space for you. Yeah, but anyway, Kristi, you're right. That makes a difference.
Yeah, and that's that. I really think it's okay. I think it's a relatively big hole, but there are championship teams that don't have someone in the backcourt that can create really well for themselves. So I think that's really fine.
And Natasha Cloud can. is the
Right.
other part of it.
Yes.
Natasha Cloud absolutely can. And so, the question is, can Ariel Atkins take that step forward and do
Yeah.
that well? There's probably no higher IQ basketball-wise in the league than Ariel Atkins.
Yeah, I mean, she's like the first, like when people ask me like, who do you really want on your show? I of course said Howard Magdal first.
Wow.
And then my second person was, I want to talk to Ariel Atkins because like I know that she like is so about it. So I want to pick her brain one day. So yeah, I agree. And then I guess the other thing is that maybe Leilani has slightly better shot selection. I know that's a knock on Tolliver, but I don't, Tolliver was so good. Like you want her taking kind of wild shots because she's going to hit those because she's Christy Tolliver. So yeah. And I agree. Now, like,
it's not great, the shot selection at times, there's no question. And so there is a scenario where DC is a more efficient team this year. In the same way that, Kurt Miller in Connecticut is a big proponent of at the rim and behind the three-point line. But he had Courtney Williams, the best mid-range shooter in the league, and the best mid-range shooter in the league since Cappy. And so he let her do what she does well, and that's a credit to Kurt. It doesn't mean that now with Courtney Williams in Atlanta, he won't make sure there's even more of an emphasis behind the three-point line and at the rim, and they become a more efficient team in the process. Not necessarily better, to be determined, because Courtney Williams is a premier talent, and that was a huge loss. Different and maybe more efficient. And I think you might see something similar in Washington.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely a let's see what happens. Yeah,
Can you see what happens already? Because this no basketball thing, I don't enjoy it. I'd like to see the basketball. Do you have basketball for us to see?
I don't know when we're gonna be able to do it. Man, all right. I'll try to I'll try to make it happen, but no promises here.
We've got a hoop in our driveway. I had Kathy Engelbert on my podcast, and I told her like we would stay more than 6 feet apart, we would watch through the window. We are here ready to help.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I can just drive down to your house too. I'm only 20 minutes away, so.
No, that absolutely sounds good. And we'll shout out our questions through a megaphone, so we could do media post game.
Yeah,
I'm in.
Great, let's do it. Well, we can make this work. Cool. So is there anything else you want to say about the backcourt right now? Or do you want to move on to the front court? I
want to talk about how much better Natasha Cloud is than people give her credit for being.
Do it.
I watched Natasha Cloud a few years ago and wondered whether she had the shot to stay in the league. She wondered the same thing. She put the time in the gym. She's become exponentially physically stronger. She is someone you cannot sag off of. And her ability to get to the basket has gotten exponentially better. I mean, it's amazing. You compare to think of her at St. Joe's and just what kind of player she has turned herself into. And they don't win that series against Connecticut without Natasha Cloud playing the way she did. She was the one who took over the LA Sparks series, the Vegas series as well. And, they don't get there without her. And so I think it's really worth considering. All right, we think of Elena Deladon as among the best players in this league. And we talk about Emma Mieseman now in that same conversation. But how many players have you taken before Natasha Cloud in this league? I'll sort of put that open-ended. I don't have an answer for you, but it's a short list.
Yeah, no, she's definitely a great point guard, to be clear. I agree. I don't know why Natasha Cloud is absolutely the point guard here. But yeah, and she's big, and she's a great defender. So,
her length too, not just tall, but her wingspan is significant. It bothers opponents. You see it up close when you're covered. It is hard for people to see their entry pathways because she's relentless, first of all, and second of all, she's got this natural wingspan that she uses to her advantage. But it's absolutely a significant thing, and just a great way in which she has turned herself into an absolute star.
Yeah, no, I agree. And well, so what I was thinking before when I was saying it might be Leilani at the 2. My other, I think one option could be maybe you put Powers at the 2. Do you see like that? I don't see why that couldn't happen.
I think she'll get time there. She'll get time at the 2, time at the 3.
Yeah.
You know, she's somebody, again, you know, she's an elite rebounder for her size. She's somebody who understands where to be on the defensive end as well as just about anybody. You know, oh, they stole her.
Yeah, she's a dog. She's so like I just loved watching her play. She shoots the same way every single time. Just, you know, down, up.
Fundamentally sound.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
it's
all those video games.
what?
Maybe it's all those video games.
Probably, I think so. Yeah, that must be the weirdest thing where you can choose yourself and just play with play like your character.
Hard to believe. Yeah.
Like it's crazy. Okay, so I think we've got the back court out of the way. I want to move on to the front court. Got to talk about Tina Charles. There's a ton of chatter around it. What arguments have you seen for and against Tina Charles trade? Because I know that there are people who are very negative on it. And I actually haven't seen that many people positive on it. But I just want to hear, number one, some of the arguments on both sides and your thoughts too.
So count me among the people who are positive about the trade for the reasons that I said. But that's the simplest, easiest argument in favor. If you're trying to max out now and you add an Olympian and a former MVP and you are simply betting on her returning to form, you're basically putting a wager on the idea that the numbers she put up in New York do not reflect who she is as a player. And when she is motivated and when she has the right role, that she will be an elite contributor. The argument against it is that the player in New York is who she is now. And that player was sub 40% from the field and below 20% from 3. And that was somebody who settled for jumpers way too often. And that is not a player who fits in with what DC did last year. And so if you think that's going to be a culture issue, if you think that's going to be a style issue, then I guess you're against it. And then on the other side of the trade as well is if you're saying, well, geez, they're giving up multiple first-round picks, and we need to plan for life after Elena Delle Donne, or life when Elena Delle Donne is not able to carry the team at all times, then maybe we needed to keep those picks. I personally think you're not going to build at 12, and that's roughly where they're going to be for the next couple of years because of Elena Delle Donne in all likelihood. And so that doesn't hold a lot of water for me. But those, I think, are the endpoints when it comes to the Tina Charles trade. But, man, I wouldn't bet against Tina Charles. And Mike Thibault, who knows her as well as just about anybody, certainly didn't think so either. Yeah,
I just think she's an amazing player. And
and she's not even signed to a max deal for a long time. She signed for a year. There's not even like, if this blew up, you're not even in a situation where like, oh my God, you're signed for the next 4 years and have to figure it out.
Yeah, I hit a sore spot, it seems.
No, it sort of boggles my mind.
Right.
I think people are afraid to go all in when it comes to team building. And
interesting.
And so, you know, teams going all in to try and win for their fans and to win for the players who are dedicating themselves. I'm for it. What can I tell you?
Yeah, I also, she's an amazing. Why would adding a really good player hurt your team? Like, I've said this before. Like, yeah, there might be diminishing returns. Like McCautry going over to the Aces. Like, I could like that. I feel like is more of an issue because like the inside, there's not really space there. But she's still a great player. There's diminishing returns.
I have to tell you, right? I think that's a huge issue, and I think it's very different. I think
this situation's like there's space for her, for Charles.
Mike doesn't make that trade unless he's had that conversation with Tina. Mike doesn't make that trade if he doesn't understand exactly how she fits offensively. And both of those things happening, I certainly believe in his ability. Now, Bill Laimbeer is no rookie in this league, and Bill Laimbeer's built championship teams in the past, but I will admit that I do not fully understand the vision in Las Vegas. I do not understand how Liz Cambage and Asia Wilson necessarily fit before you even get into adding Angel McCaughtry to some space that doesn't exist. That is a team that does not have nearly enough three-point shooting for my money, doesn't utilize what three-point shooting they do have, and somebody like Kelsey Plum nearly enough. If I were running that team, Kelsey Plum would have a usage rate of 25 instead of below 20 the way she's been. And so Las Vegas feels very combustible to me in a way that DC does not. Time will tell. And of course, you add into it the fact that we have this unknown season that is going to be, something different added into it. But man, I don't see, I can see a non-zero chance DC goes wrong. I could see a much higher chance than that Vegas goes wrong.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think that's a great evaluation. So how are you seeing Tina fitting into this team? How's Tebow gonna use her? And start with the offensive end, and then we'll get to the defensive end after that.
So I still have PTSD from 5 years of watching a lack of New York Liberty point guards fail to get Tina Charles the ball where she would best take advantage of it, and before the double team came over. I'm sure Tina Charles has significantly more of that experience than I do as the one who lived it instead of just covering it. Yeah, I would think so. And so now I want you to envision, if you can, Tina Charles underneath, setting up Tina Charles as effective at finishing as anybody, with more of an array of post moves than just about anyone I can think of in the league today. And she's either doing that single covered, which God help you, or she's getting doubled, and then Tina Charles, who's an elite passer, is finding, Ariel Atkins, who's a tremendous three-point shooter. Yeah. Emma Beesman, when she's out there, if they're going big, right? Elena Deldon, one of the best shooters in the history of the league. Natasha Cloud, a tremendous three-point shooter. Leilani Mitchell, north of 40% from three before you even get to the bench, filled with people like Ariel Powers who were able to knock down shots.
John Hawkins.
Right. I mean, nobody on that roster can't hit a shot from anywhere. And so that's, what do I envision for Tina Charles? A whole lot of easy baskets and a whole lot of Sophie's choices for opposing defenses. That's what I envision.
Yeah. And then how do you think she's going to be doing First I want to ask, what does this mean for Emma, Tiana Hawkins, just the front court on the team?
There's slightly fewer minutes to go around. There's no question about it. I mean, I wonder how often we'll see something like Elena at the three. And Mike talked about this when we spoke to him after the trade for Tina, which was that Elena is up for playing the three more. So suddenly you've got, oh my God, a 6'5" three, Emma Meesman a 6'4", and Tina a 6'4", 5". I don't know how you match them size-wise before you even get into the skill portion of a front court. But, they could do a lot of different things if they want to go smaller, if they want to throw numbers at you. And so the other part of it is, in theory, and again, in a 36-game season, and this was originally, let's not forget, this was going to be a 36-game season in 93 days. This was going to be more action packed into the calendar than what you had in 2018 thanks to the World Championships, the World Cup, which was 34 in 91. And that taxed a lot of teams, including veteran teams. So having safety in numbers for a veteran team like DC would have, that wasn't a bad thing if you can play a full 36-game season. Now, whether it ends up being that or something more akin to what we saw from the National Women's Soccer League this week, which is a tournament in lieu of a season, remains to be seen.
Right. Yeah. And what do you think about Sanders? I just want to hear your thoughts on Sanders, because today, the last few days, and I was looking this stuff up, this was the first time I ever looked at Sanders' game, and I really, really like her. And so I just want to hear your thoughts on her.
She's a starting center a lot of other places, a shot blocker, somebody who's able to finish effectively. She's someone who, here's the easiest way to put it. They didn't need to upgrade from Sanders. They just chose to maximize their talent with Tina Charles anyway. That's the way I'd put it.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I think that she is underrated, number one, and I underrated her until a couple, hours ago, literally, and it's just because she's so quiet about how good she is. It's like the Emma Meesseman thing.
Yeah.
But like I think Sanders stretches the floor really well. No, she doesn't take threes, but she shoots 42% from the mid range, and that's really good, and it's from
very comfortable there.
Very comfortable, and I think that it has a lot of advantages. The ball goes in the basket more often than a lot of centers who take that step behind the line, and then it doesn't bounce off to crazy out to nowhere, and then the other team can go and in transition. I think that there's a lot of good for that, even though she doesn't get to 3-point line, and maybe she doesn't get as many points, even when there's more efficiency, or even when she shoots it more efficiently, like it's still like the other side of the ball where that goes. I think it makes up for that. So I think that
and don't forget that part of the defensive equation for DC as well, right? Just the fact that they are making as many shots as they are, just as often as the opposing team is taking the ball out of the basket instead of having a transition opportunity off of a miss, helps to make the overall equation of DC's defense be more effective than, let's say, it otherwise would have been if it were a league average offensive team.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. Oh yeah, and then how many years do you think Tina is gonna go for? She's 31 right now, I'm pretty sure. So how long do you think she's gonna go on for? And then also, how do you evaluate years, how many more years of service someone has? What do you look for? And
I mean, it's a great question, and I'm afraid I don't have a definitive answer or anything like that for you. But
of course, yeah,
what I think is that if she revitalizes, there's no reason why she can't play as long as she wants to. Of course, Tina does many things. Tina Charles contains multitudes. Tina Charles is a filmmaker. Tina Charles is somebody who has a rich charitable endeavor set of life. I mean, it's just absolutely what she wants to do and how she wants to do it. Does she want to play again in 2024 in the Olympics if, for whatever reason, we don't get an Olympics in 2021? All of these are great unanswered questions, and those timelines change for players. I know that there was a period of time where Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi thought 2016 was it, both for USA Basketball and professionally, and then that changed, and now they were going to go through 2020 as far as USA Basketball went, and then kept it open-ended. And who knows? Who knows? If we see Diana at 50 playing on USA Basketball, it wouldn't surprise me at this point. And selfishly, I hope it happens because she's one of the best coaches in the league.
Yeah. I guess I was just when I see. I wouldn't think that there would be a definitive way of being like, this is when she's going to be able, or when she's going to retire. There's just no way of actually doing that. But I definitely, there are definitely trends that I see, Sue doesn't take as many free throw attempts, during games and things like that over her career.
That was a good tweet I saw of yours.
What'd you say?
That was a good tweet I saw of yours. It's interesting, right? And how often they attack the basket when they're settling, and does that adjustment, which happens so often to guards as they get into their 30s, does that adjustment end up hurting their overall efficiency? And what's been fascinating in both Taurasi and Bird's cases, it hasn't. They've been able to make that trade-off and actually get better. Diana Taurasi ended up taking more threes as her career went on and became a more efficient player as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, she's just ridiculous, obviously. So anything else you want to say about the rotation here? Just
that even if they're hit by injuries, nobody on that roster isn't going to be able to contribute. Carol Esley is the only one who doesn't have the experience doing so. She's a really talented player. It would not surprise me if, especially having been with them for the year, even though she was injured, and now she's getting back into it, if she's able to help them right away. Rookies tend to do well for Mike when he plays them. He plays them when they're ready, and he gets them going. I just think, I saw Eric the other day tweeted out something that DC was 1B on his list of contenders.
Yeah.
And I And I think the world of Eric. I read him religiously. But Ron. Like DC, absolutely. Like if I'm making my list, right? DC has to be the team to beat. And the only one who I think you can make a reasonable argument is also a team to beat. Not to say there aren't other elite teams, Connecticut being among them. LA, Las Vegas, we need to make arguments for a bunch of them. Is Seattle. And because Seattle is effectively, we are going into a season where there are two defending champs, right?
Yeah.
Seattle never got to defend their championship in 2018. Mm-hmm. Now you got Sue back. Now you got Stewie back. And you got a Stewie with something to prove. Like, God help us all, right?
Right.
And even Dan Hughes now, a full season being able to coach. After he missed part of the season last year, recovering. So all of that is to say, I would go, those are the co-favorites until I see otherwise.
Okay, yeah. So you see those as like a 1A kind of thing. Yeah, or 1A versus 1B, because that's kind of how Eric was doing it. I also thought Washington, how can you beat Washington when they are just so they got better over the offseason, at least they stayed the same, which was amazing. It was
the best offense in league history.
Exactly. So even to me, even if they go down a little bit in their offensive efficiency, going down a little bit is, if they get 110 offensive rating, that still is 7 points above, the Chicago Sky's 103, which was second place.
I'll play devil's advocate for you then. Maybe the argument goes up. Elena Deladon, unfortunately, has had injuries in the past. She's injured at the wrong time. Well, that's happened throughout her career. That could happen again. Connecticut was dominant, especially when John Paul Jones was well fed. John Paul Jones doesn't have to battle for dominance of the ball with Courtney Williams anymore. And so maybe John Paul Jones turns into a 25 and 15 machine on a regular basis, and she's unstoppable come the playoffs. Maybe the Chicago Sky take a massive leap forward, and Diamond DeShields goes from all-star into MVP candidate. You could absolutely, this league, the margin for error is, I think, not as large as two standard deviations makes it feel like it is. But that said, things have to happen. Less has to go right for DC than anyone else, and Seattle too. If Seattle simply replicates 2018 and DC replicates 2019, I have been arguing for a couple of years, the thing we deserve is a 100% healthy Elena Deladon and a 100% healthy Brianna Stewart in a battle for the ages. And that should be our Bird versus Magic for the WNBA for the next decade. That's what we should have.
It would be.
God knows we deserve it after what we've been through in 2020.
Yeah, no, they just seem, they were so dominant last year. It's just gotta, as long as EDD stays healthy, I think that they will stay as very close to as dominant as they were.
Cloud matters too, though. Don't forget Cloud.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I'm just saying, something, God forbid, happens to Natasha Cloud. Who is their primary playmaker? Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be hard, but someone else can step up. I think Ariel Atkins could, if she's I have to be that player, I think she would do it.
She would be up for trying, and maybe in a pinch. But I'm just saying it's not just a question of will; it's a skill level too.
Of course.
Yeah.
So what kind of style do you think they're going to be playing this year, and how different is it going to be from last year? Where are they going to shift their focus? Because their roster is different, and it's got to shift the focus, especially with Tina Charles there. So
I think they're going. Listen, I really do. I think when you look at the success Sanders had, I think Tina's going to operate in that space. I think you're going to be looking, to perhaps a little bit more of Natasha Cloud creating her own shot to help make up for Christy not doing that. But I don't think you're going to see some major changes in terms of how DC looks for and hunts its own shots on a possession-by-possession basis.
Well, I'm going to push back here a little bit. When I looked at Sanders's shot profile, she took fewer shots in the paint and in the restricted area than she did in the mid range. If you've ever looked at it. So I think Charles will be in the post more than Sanders was because she's a better post player. So
if you're trading those, think about it this way, right?
Yeah.
Sanders didn't necessarily benefit from being able to finish against single coverage as well as Tina Charles did. So a lot of those shots, just by virtue of like where Tina's going to be able to get position and the way in which people are going to have to respect her game, is going to alter where she starts. And so I withdraw my disagreement, because I agree with you 100%. I think functionally you'll end up seeing Tina get those shots. I would go back to the Tina Charles 2012 shot profile in Connecticut to see what I think she's going to end up doing in B.
Yeah, that's kind of the biggest stylistic thing I think we'll see. I mean, maybe like a little bit more spot up shooting just with Leilani instead of Tolliver in there, but and that's kind of it. I mean, maybe that'll slow them down a little bit, but I don't think that that's a bad thing to play slower basketball or anything. And so and what about their defense? Do you think it's gonna suffer at all, just generally, or?
I don't. I think they're going to be having Tina be able to finish off opponents who get past the perimeter defending, and be able to block some shots and be able to end possessions with her elite defensive rebounding, I think will make them a slightly better defensive team than they were, which is to take nothing away from LaToya Sanders. Again, it is a case of trading good for even better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, those are all my questions. But actually, I like to end with this question sometimes of which player. Well, I can kind of just by talking to you, I get this sense. But on this team, who are you most excited for this coming season, whatever that ends up being?
That's such a hard question.
It's a fun one, right?
So I'm going to give you a cop-out answer instead of picking one. I'm going to say that just the chance to see Elena Deladon play again is something I'm looking forward to as a basketball fan. And the chance to interview Natasha Cloud is something I'm looking forward to as a basketball media member, because she is one of my favorite interviews in the league.
So you have interviewed her before?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But the chance to see Tina Charles finally win a championship, when I've seen her put so much time and energy into everything, and see what Tina's new lease on life is something I'm equally excited about. So I'll go with that trio if I had to pick three.
Yeah, that's fine. I like that. I didn't even think about that. Wasn't, I thought you were gonna say Natasha Cloud, because you're like, no, don't sleep on her and things like that. So
I don't sleep on her, but it's it's tough. There's a lot. This team is
the entire team, just like, can you do it again? I think, man, those are good answers. I think for me, now that you're saying Tina Charles, I think that's who I'm going to go with, because I'm ready to see her in a place where she will thrive, because New York, like, there just wasn't the talent around her, or like the synergy wasn't there. So to see Tina Charles, like, I'm so excited to see Tina Charles just like you said, just dominate, or dominate with still a usage of 20% on this team.
Exactly.
Cool. Anything else you want to talk about here, or should we start saying our promoting ourselves and saying bye?
Sure, let's do that.
All right, where can people find you? Where do you write? Let's just remind them if they weren't here at the beginning.
At Howard Megdal on Twitter is the catch-all for it. Go to TheNext.substack.com and check out our 24/7, 365 days a year, except in 2020, where we're 366 days a year, covering women's basketball. Make sure you check out, I do things also over at The 9 newsletter. The 9 is every day, every weekday across 5 different women's sports, a newsletter covered with original reporting, massive links, where everything that you want to be reading about, listening to, and seeing in 5 different women's sports comes to your inbox every single day.
Awesome, Howard. That was great. Thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this.
So much fun.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you liked it. All right, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.